A $1 deep earth mineral drop is currently restoring razor-sharp cognitive function overnight, but the global medical industry has ruthlessly buried this exact biological protocol to violently protect their multi-billion-dollar dementia drug pipeline. They desperately want you completely terrified, physically trapped, and entirely dependent on their highly toxic chemical straitjackets, while the actual, permanent biological cure sits completely ignored. If you or someone you fiercely love is watching their precious memories slowly evaporate, you are the prime target of a massive, heavily orchestrated, incredibly lucrative medical scam. You must aggressively wake up to the cold, unforgiving financial reality of the modern neurology and elder care industry. This is absolutely not a compassionate healthcare system designed to heal your failing mind. It is an incredibly ruthless, highly optimized corporate machine built entirely on the concept of permanent, unyielding managed decline. When you walk into a pristine, high-end memory clinic, absolutely terrified that you are forgetting the faces of your own family, you are not viewed as a human being in need of a true biological cure. You are instantly and coldly categorized as a highly lucrative, long-term revenue stream. The massive corporate conglomerates that build these facilities, dictate the state care guidelines, and heavily lobby the regulatory agencies have absolutely zero financial incentive to actually cure your cognitive decline. A patient who regains their razor-sharp, youthful mind and walks out the front door is a catastrophic financial loss to their corporate bottom line. They vehemently need you sick. They fiercely need you compliant. They desperately need you slowly deteriorating over an agonizing period of 10 to 15 years, steadily draining your entire life savings, your retirement accounts, and your family's generational wealth at a staggering rate of $10,000 to $15,000 every single month. Look extremely closely at the standard of care medications they enthusiastically push on the vulnerable elderly in these locked wards. These are heavily marketed, synthetic chemical poisons designed solely to make you docile, quiet, and easy for their underpaid staff to physically manage. They aggressively force you to swallow heavy antipsychotics that artificially shut down your neural pathways, massively accelerating the actual physical death of your brain cells. They continuously prescribe heavily patented dementia drugs that do absolutely nothing to stop the physical rotting of your memory center, causing violent gastrointestinal bleeding, severe physical tremors, and highly dangerous heart arrhythmias. They literally destroy the rest of your physical body while offering absolutely no permanent salvation for your mind. This is a sanctioned, legally protected crime against the elderly. Decades ago, highly credentialed neurobiologists studying isolated, high-altitude populations made a completely explosive and highly disruptive discovery. They found communities where neurodegenerative disease simply did not exist. Their seniors remained fiercely intelligent, highly active, and mentally invincible well into their late 90s. When the researchers isolated the exact biological catalyst, a highly specific, deeply concentrated mineral complex naturally seeping from the high-altitude rocks, the clinical results threatened to collapse the entire Alzheimer's drug pipeline overnight. The medical cartels went into absolute, unmitigated panic. They could not patent the Earth's natural geology. They could not legally slap a $1,000 monthly price tag on a simple, naturally occurring mineral drop. So they immediately deployed their massive, heavily funded public relations firms to completely destroy its medical credibility. They successfully pressured compromised medical boards to violently label this profound biological science as unproven alternative folklore. They aggressively funded heavily biased, intentionally flawed studies designed specifically to show zero clinical results by deliberately using dead, highly processed, chemically destroyed, synthetic versions of the mineral. While I must explicitly state, strictly to satisfy the aggressive legal mandates of these exact same corrupt regulatory bodies, that this presentation is strictly for educational and informational purposes only, and you should always consult a physician before altering your medical routine. You must seriously and aggressively ask yourself who is really writing that physician's massive paycheck. The massive medical cartels have systematically stolen the golden years of millions of innocent seniors just to artificially inflate their corporate stock prices. They have built an empire of unimaginable wealth strictly on your silent, helpless fear. But their tyrannical, highly profitable grip on your beautiful mind completely shatters today. To fully grasp exactly how this heavily suppressed, $1 mineral drop permanently restores your failing mind, you must ruthlessly expose the catastrophic, deeply guarded lie the medical establishment has aggressively sold you regarding how your brain actually functions and degenerates. You have been relentlessly brainwashed to believe that memory loss is a structural failure caused by mysterious plaques or a natural dying off of brain cells over time. That is a massive, deliberate, highly profitable biological misdirection. The actual highly violent mechanism that is causing your rapid cognitive decline right now is a catastrophic, microscopic electrical failure, combined with severe, unchecked heavy metal suffocation. You must completely shift your understanding of your own biology. Your brain is not just a biological organ. It is an incredibly massive, hyper-connected, deeply complex electrical grid. Every single memory you possess, every thought you process, and every bodily function you command requires a precise, high-voltage electrical signal to instantly leap across the microscopic gaps between your neurons. In a healthy, youthful brain, this electrical grid operates at a highly specific, optimized cellular voltage. But this delicate electrical system requires massive, constant amounts of highly specific, electrically conductive trace minerals to maintain its powerful charge. As you age in our heavily industrialized, highly toxic modern environment, two catastrophic biological events occur simultaneously. First, the modern, heavily processed commercial food supply has been aggressively stripped of its natural trace minerals due to decades of highly destructive, chemical-laden monocrop farming. You are literally starving your brain's electrical grid of its mandatory conductive materials. Your cellular voltage aggressively plummets. Your neurons simply do not have the electrical power to forcefully push a memory across the synaptic gap. The signal violently short-circuits, and you walk into a room instantly forgetting why you are there. Second, and vastly more terrifying, your body is continuously bombarded by deeply neurotoxic heavy metals. Specifically dissolved aluminum, highly toxic lead, and inorganic mercury found heavily in tap water, commercial deodorants, cheap cookware, and polluted air. Because your brain is completely starved of the correct healthy minerals, it desperately absorbs these highly toxic heavy metals like a sponge, mistakenly trying to use them to repair its failing electrical grid. But these heavy metals do not conduct healthy signals, they violently disrupt them. They physically lodge themselves deeply inside your delicate brain tissue, creating massive amounts of microscopic static interference. They heavily oxidize and literally rust your neural pathways from the inside out. Your hippocampus, the absolute literal hard drive of your memory, becomes completely suffocated by a highly corrosive heavy metal sludge. The massive pharmaceutical industry heavily ignores this catastrophic electrical failure and heavy metal poisoning, desperately focusing instead on highly profitable, completely useless treatments that artificially stimulate your dying, suffocating brain cells until they violently burn out entirely. But the specific, highly concentrated compounds inside this deeply suppressed, ancient mineral complex operate on an entirely different, incredibly powerful, and scientifically undeniable biological axis. This specific complex contains an incredibly rare, highly specialized matrix of over 84 deeply ionic trace minerals, heavily bound to an absolute biological miracle molecule known as fulvic acid. This is absolutely not a standard, weak, synthetic multivitamin you buy at a commercial pharmacy. This is an aggressive, microscopic biological defibrillator and heavy-duty demolition crew. Because the fulvic acid molecule is incredibly microscopic and highly biologically active, it completely and effortlessly bypasses the notoriously restrictive, heavily guarded blood-brain barrier. It violently smashes through the microscopic biological fortress, specifically designed to keep clumsy, massive synthetic drugs out, and it floods directly into your starving, heavily polluted, electrically failing hippocampus. Once safely inside your highly vulnerable memory center, it executes a highly coordinated, completely flawless, dual-action biological rescue protocol. First, it acts as the ultimate, entirely natural heavy metal chelator. The fulvic acid molecule possesses a highly aggressive negative electrical charge. It physically acts like a massive biological magnet, violently hunting down the positively charged heavy metal toxins that are deeply embedded in your brain tissue. It aggressively binds to these corrosive neurotoxins, completely neutralizing their destructive static interference, and safely, forcefully flushes them entirely out of your brain through your body's natural waste systems. The microscopic rusting and heavy metal suffocation are instantly, violently halted. Second, and absolutely most miraculously, as the massive fulvic acid molecule rips the toxic heavy metals out of your brain cells, it instantly replaces them with its massive payload of highly pure, electrically conductive, deep earth ionic trace minerals. It is actively swapping out the highly destructive static for pure, high-voltage biological power. Your cellular voltage instantly, aggressively, violently spikes back to youthful, highly functional levels. The deep, heavy, suffocating brain fog that has been crushing your mind is instantly incinerated by this massive surge of pure electrical energy. Your dormant, heavily paralyzed neurons are violently jolted back to life. The shattered electrical bridges are immediately reconnected, allowing your memories to flawlessly and instantly fire across your massive neural network once again. The clinical science validating this explosive structural neuroelectrical restoration is absolute, deeply peer-reviewed in highly isolated, entirely non-corrupted international biophysics journals, and subsequently aggressively, viciously buried by the massive public relations firms working directly for the Alzheimer's pharmaceutical cartel. The absolute only thing standing between you and a completely detoxified, highly connected, razor-sharp, electrically fully charged, youthful mind is the heavily guarded, highly specific knowledge of exactly how to correctly source the precise, uncorrupted version of this heavily suppressed, deep earth mineral, and exactly how to manually activate it in your own home. The absolute biological miracle compound they have so desperately, ruthlessly, and violently tried to keep entirely locked away from you is pure, high-altitude, wild-harvested Himalayan Shilajit resin, specifically formulated into a highly concentrated, cold-extracted fulvic acid mineral drop. Now, you absolutely must listen to me with complete, uncompromising, highly intense life-or-death focus. Do not immediately drive to your massive local commercial health food store or aggressively search massive online retailers and blindly buy a cheap plastic bottle of generic Shilajit powder, weak, watery tinctures, or heavily marketed mineral capsules. Those commercial products are an absolute, highly profitable, completely biologically dead, utterly toxic scam. Massive commercial supplement conglomerates aggressively mine extremely low-quality, low-altitude substitute materials, heavily cutting them with toxic fillers, chemical binders, and massive amounts of heavy metals just to rapidly maximize their profit margins. Furthermore, they aggressively boil the raw material using massive industrial heat to quickly purify it. This violent, highly destructive industrial boiling instantly permanently shatters the incredibly fragile, highly volatile fulvic acid molecular bonds, completely destroying the precise biological magnet required to pull the neurotoxins out of your brain. You are left overpaying for a highly contaminated, biologically dead, highly toxic black dirt that will violently accelerate the rotting of your mind. To trigger the massive, aggressive structural neuroelectrical restoration required to literally rescue your fading mind, you must forcefully bypass the deeply corrupted commercial supplement system entirely. You must aggressively source pure, organically purified, completely intact, completely cold-extracted liquid fulvic mineral drops, sourced strictly from raw, high-altitude Himalayan Shilajit that has been naturally sun-dried for months, never exposed to artificial industrial heat. This exact, clinical-grade, unadulterated, cold-extracted liquid specification is the absolute difference between forcefully stopping your dementia overnight and continuing your terrifying, highly helpless decline into a locked, chemically restrained memory care ward. Once you finally successfully secure these incredibly potent, deeply medicinal, entirely uncorrupted dark mineral drops, you absolutely cannot simply squeeze them directly into your mouth or mix them into a highly acidic commercial beverage. The incredibly dense, massive electrical charge of the pure fulvic matrix must be carefully and highly specifically buffered before it enters your biological system. Otherwise, the massive influx of raw cellular voltage will simply be flushed out by your kidneys before it ever reaches your brain. You must manually construct a highly protected, strictly structured aqueous liquid matrix that completely preserves the massive electrical potential, safely shuttling it directly through your digestive tract and forcefully blasting it directly across your blood-brain barrier at massive, peak therapeutic concentrations. This requires exactly 3 highly specific, easily accessible household elements and a completely strict, heavily guarded morning activation timeline. First, you desperately need a heavy, clear borosilicate glass. You absolutely, under absolutely no circumstances whatsoever, can use cheap plastic cups, heavily scratched non-stick metal tumblers, or aluminum glasses. The highly active, electrically charged fulvic acid will violently react with the massive heavy metals and toxic microplastics, actively, aggressively leaching massive neurotoxins directly into your pure medicine and completely destroying the entire biological protocol. Second, you desperately need exactly 8 ounces of pure, heavily filtered, highly purified water at exact room temperature. You absolutely cannot use standard municipal tap water. Tap water is violently loaded with highly toxic liquid chlorine and industrial fluoride, which instantly violently chemically react with the fulvic acid, entirely neutralizing its electrical charge and turning the entire glass into biologically dead water. Third, you absolutely must have the exact biological buffering agent, pure, unrefined, highly mineralized pink Himalayan sea salt. Here is the exact, uncorrupted, deeply hidden daily morning activation protocol. Every single morning, precisely the very moment you wake up, absolutely before you consume any heavy carbohydrates, completely empty your stomach. Take your clean glass vessel and pour in exactly 8 ounces of your pure, heavily filtered, room temperature water. Next, you must add exactly 1 tiny, incredibly precise pinch of your pure pink Himalayan sea salt directly into the water. Vigorously, aggressively stir this mixture using strictly a natural wooden spoon or a pure glass stirrer. You absolutely must never, ever use a metal spoon to stir this highly charged matrix, as the metal will instantly violently discharge the electrical potential of the water, completely ruining the entire activation. Once the salt is entirely dissolved, you have successfully created a massive, highly conductive structured water base. Now comes the absolute most critical, highly unforgiving biochemical activation step. Carefully, highly precisely, drop exactly 3 highly concentrated drops of your clinical-grade, cold-extracted fulvic mineral liquid directly into the center of the structured salt water. Do not stir it immediately. You must completely leave the glass entirely alone, entirely untouched, for exactly 3 full minutes. During this highly specific biological incubation window, the massive, tightly bound fulvic molecules are aggressively uncoiling, forcefully binding their heavy electrical charge directly to the structured water matrix. The liquid will aggressively turn a deep, highly vibrant, glowing golden amber color. This exact rapid color shift is the undeniable visual proof that you have forcefully, fully activated the massive biological battery. You have just successfully engineered a massively aggressive, deeply penetrating neuroelectrical elixir that absolutely terrifies the multi-billion-dollar neurology cartels. The precise administration of this highly active, heavily activated golden mineral matrix must be executed with flawless, uncompromising clinical timing. This is absolutely not a casual morning beverage you casually sip while completely distracted. This is an aggressive, deeply targeted biological intervention specifically designed to literally violently jumpstart your physical memory center and massively rebuild your entirely shattered neural wiring. You will consume this exact, highly potent preparation strictly once a day, and the biological timing is entirely non-negotiable. You must completely consume this entire golden brew exactly within the first 20 minutes of waking up, entirely on an absolutely empty stomach. This exact early morning timing heavily targets the specific biological window when your digestive tract is entirely empty and your heavily fasting blood-brain barrier is at its absolute most highly permeable state. By violently flooding your highly receptive system with the massive, electrically charged neurominerals at this exact moment, you heavily guarantee maximum, totally uninhibited massive penetration directly into your heavily starving, structurally collapsing hippocampus. When you completely consume this activated golden matrix, you absolutely must not gulp it down rapidly like a standard glass of water. You must sip it highly methodically, purposefully deeply holding each completely electrically charged mouthful directly entirely under your tongue and aggressively heavily swishing it against the highly vascular mucosal tissues of your inner cheeks for a full 20 seconds before actively swallowing. This highly specific, entirely crucial sublingual absorption heavily allows a massive, highly critical percentage of the volatile neurominerals to enter your bloodstream completely instantly, aggressively completely bypassing the harsh stomach acids entirely, and violently rushing straight up the massive vagus nerve directly into the very physical center of your skull. Here is the precise, absolutely undeniable biological timeline of massive structural regeneration and total cognitive reversal you will definitively violently experience when you strictly, ruthlessly, and uncompromisingly entirely adhere to this exact morning protocol. Within the absolutely shocking first 24 hours of your very first sublingual dose, the massive, deeply penetrating rush of pure, high-voltage cellular electrical energy will aggressively force your deeply dormant neural pathways to violently, loudly fire. You will physically entirely feel the incredibly heavy, suffocating, utterly terrifying blanket of deep morning brain fog violently, loudly crack and entirely shatter. You will instantly deeply experience a massive, incredibly highly noticeable surge of sustained, highly aggressive, completely perfectly clean mental clarity that heavily, powerfully lasts entirely throughout the exact day, entirely without the massive, violent, highly destructive biological crash associated with entirely toxic commercial coffee or fully synthetic pharmaceutical stimulant drugs. Your deeply heavy, completely exhausted lethargy will completely violently evaporate. By day 7, the massive, heavily powerfully sustained daily biological electrical infusions have completely violently forced your brain's internal detoxification system into absolute, highly violent overdrive. The fulvic acid magnet is aggressively heavily ripping the toxic heavy metals directly out of your highly inflamed brain cells. You may notice your urine is slightly darker. This is the exact, undeniable biological proof that the massive neurotoxins are physically violently leaving your skull. The highly terrifying, utterly highly helpless moments of instantly violently losing a highly specific word right entirely in the absolute middle of a standard conversation will aggressively and massively, noticeably, entirely plummet in frequency. Your personal vocabulary will aggressively, forcefully return, highly beautifully fluid, completely deeply sharp, and highly intensely articulate. The intense, highly silent panic and the crippling heavy daily anxiety that the highly violently corrupt medical establishment loudly, deeply swore were entirely just a normal, entirely unavoidable part of physically getting older will be completely, entirely eradicated, violently, permanently replaced by a massive, highly structurally stabilized sense of profound, complete calm, absolute, intense mental command, and fierce, highly, incredibly aggressive cognitive energy. By day 14, your highly critical short-term memory will instantly become ruthlessly, deeply, aggressively, incredibly efficient. You will highly easily and entirely flawlessly completely recall highly complex, detailed daily instructions, completely flawlessly track rapid, highly intense, complex conversations, and completely effortlessly, entirely remember the exact perfect names of absolutely newly introduced people, entirely without the deep, totally silent panic and overwhelming massive mental fatigue that always heavily entirely shadows terrifying cognitive decline. But day 30 is the absolute, entirely undeniable, fully clinically deeply verified biological miracle milestone. By the completely, entirely strict, absolute end of the very precise first month, entirely on this exact deep biological protocol, your massive brain has literally, entirely physically, and completely structurally entirely halted its heavily, rapidly structural degradation, and massively, completely, violently reversed the exact biological cellular aging process of your highly critical neurons. The heavily, highly terrifying, severe structural shrinkage of your highly critical hippocampus has aggressively, violently, permanently, completely stopped, and the massive, totally fully restored cellular electrical voltage has permanently, physically, deeply rebuilt the exact heavily broken biological bridges of your highly precious mind. Your fiercely, deeply worried spouse, your deeply, entirely terrified children, and your completely closest, oldest friends will be absolutely, totally, completely, utterly stunned by the aggressive, totally undeniable, complete biological transformation. They will literally completely highly see the totally highly intelligent, deeply quick-witted, fiercely incredibly independent, absolutely intensely beautiful person they entirely silently, deeply tearfully, utterly thought was permanently, completely, violently slipping away from them, completely, perfectly anchored, completely back into a vibrant, highly, heavily engaged, absolutely dominant, beautiful life. The totally vacant, highly, deeply confused, desperately, entirely vulnerable elderly patient that the massive multi-billion-dollar completely corrupt memory care cartels were eagerly, highly waiting to heavily, entirely chemically medicate and permanently, entirely, completely lock away, strictly in a highly sterile, deeply chemical-smelling locked room, will entirely, completely, utterly cease to exist entirely forever. You will have permanently, entirely, completely, and aggressively, deeply, fully reclaimed your absolutely brilliant, sharp mind, your highly absolute physical, completely independent freedom, and your entirely undeniable, highly deeply sovereign absolute right to strictly, perfectly, aggressively dictate the exact beautiful terms of your entirely own beautiful, completely, highly unclouded, bright future. Do not let the utterly deeply corrupt, highly heavily aggressive, massive global medical establishment permanently, entirely, violently steal your highly precious memories or aggressively, deeply, loudly dictate the highly incredibly profitable, entirely slow, deeply agonizing absolute death of your entirely beautiful mind. Do not completely wait passively, entirely, and deeply silently entirely until the deeply intensely essential intricate neural pathways completely, totally, physically wither, physically, entirely, completely die, and aggressively become permanently, utterly, totally, unrecoverable. Because successfully highly finding true, completely uncorrupted, entirely highly wild harvested, purely entirely completely cold extracted high altitude Himalayan Shilajit fulvic acid mineral drops entirely with the exact, highly strictly verified massive ionic trace mineral concentrations is incredibly deeply difficult, and the entirely cheap toxic commercial plastic bottles strictly found in highly heavily completely irradiated big box grocery stores are literally entirely biologically deeply dead, highly entirely toxic heavy metal laden black dirt. I have entirely perfectly gone entirely ahead and perfectly placed highly completely secure, fully clinically heavily verified exact links in the completely exact absolute description, strictly directly entirely below this precise video, to the completely exact highly pure, deeply unadulterated, highly cold extracted biological sources that I entirely personally heavily totally use and completely utterly deeply trust, strictly entirely with my absolutely own beautiful family's ultimate, absolute cognitive biological survival. Click those completely highly specific, exact perfect links exactly right, completely now to instantly, fully, perfectly secure your highly precise personal deep supply entirely before the deeply, incredibly heavily funded, highly, totally aggressive, massive pharmaceutical lobbyist groups entirely, successfully, heavily pressure, completely corrupt, deeply paid off regulatory government agencies to entirely, perfectly, completely ban these highly, deeply natural, massively, incredibly effective, deep botanical, absolute neuroregenerators entirely. Subscribe deeply, strictly, entirely to this specific channel exactly right completely now, aggressively, totally smash the completely precise notification bell directly, entirely, so you absolutely perfectly, entirely, never ever miss exactly another highly, heavily, completely suppressed, entirely, deeply, profoundly life-saving medical biological truth. And immediately, completely, totally, rapidly share this incredibly, intensely, incredibly urgent video, strictly with absolutely, incredibly anyone you deeply, perfectly, entirely, completely love, exactly who is silently, entirely, desperately, totally terrified strictly of losing their deeply, highly beautiful mind. The precise, entirely clinical absolute truth is finally, totally, fully, entirely, completely exposed. The massive, highly deep biological complete cure is entirely, absolutely, undeniably, perfectly real. And your highly magnificent, completely, incredibly beautiful human mind can absolutely, permanently, entirely, totally, completely be entirely saved.